The presenting sponsor of Very Happy Stories is Curry Ingram Academy, promoting strengths and supporting differences. Happy day. I'm Eliza Blass, your storyteller. I'm raising two very unique kids, both suffering from conditions like anxiety, depression, ADHD, OCD, and more. Just when I thought life couldn't get any harder, the universe dropped a big ol' lemon on us in the form of Lyme disease. Since my darkest days, I have healed, and I know our stories have more gratitude than grievance. Meet more inspirational storytellers and self-healers right here. Let's heal one story at a time. Happy day, friends. This is a phenomenal interview. I am busting up shame with the shame-busting psychologist herself, Dr. Shawn Horn. Dr. Shawn is a TEDx speaker, columnist, TV host, podcaster, and founder of Inspired Living School, which is an online resource supporting your healing journey. Did you know that at the core of basically our issues, anxiety, depression, perfectionism, people-pleasing, self-worthiness, do you know what is at the bottom and at the core of all of that? Shame. Shame, my friends, and we are unpacking it today. Dr. Shawn is going to define what shame is, how there are different types of shame, how our nervous system comes into play, and how we can modify our parenting to raise our children with less shame. This is one of those episodes you might need to even listen to twice. It is packed with so many amazing examples and resources. So without further ado, this is Dr. Shawn's Very Happy Story. Happy day. Welcome to Very Happy Stories. I am so excited and honored to have Dr. Shawn on Very Happy Stories. Dr. Shawn, the shame-busting psychologist. Thank you so much for being here today.
It is a joy. Thank you.
I know I've wanted to have this conversation for a long time because as I am raising my own children, and I know the audience, all moms, I know that we do have struggles in raising our children sometime, and we don't even realize that our own trauma is getting in the way. And so I really want to help all of us get to the root and do some healing so we can all serve our families best. And that has a lot to do with shame, I'm learning.
Yes. And trauma is different than what a lot of people think too. So if you have a listener that's saying, I don't really have trauma, I think after hearing our conversation today, you might discover what that means for you specifically and how you may experience trauma symptoms that you didn't know were actually trauma.
100%. Tell us more about your story. How did you uncover this root cause trauma situation?
How it connects with parenting and things. I'm going to tell that story today.
Let's do it.
Which is when I started my doctoral program, my first year, I got pregnant with baby number one. My second year in the program, when baby number one was 9 months old, I got pregnant again. So here I am in my doctoral program with two babies. And I was a first generation, a college student, and I had fought so hard to get to that place because if people hear my other stories, they'll hear how I was misdiagnosed as a child and put in special ed, and I didn't think I was smart. And so later I was a late bloomer academically and discovered that I was quite capable intellectually. And so I had worked so hard to get to that point, and I just thought, I do not want to give up on this dream. So my husband and I just teamed up together and we figured out a way for me to remain in my program with these two babies, breastfeeding them, doing the whole thing. And it was so important to me that I was a really good mom. I had worked in group homes for, I think about 7 years before that had started. And so I had worked with at-risk youth. I had worked with kids who had emotional behavioral problems. And I knew that parenting was a big job. And I really wanted to do a good job. And I'm a little anxious, and anxious parents want to be perfect parents, right?
Oh, yes, they do. And from my experience, the anxious parents end up having some anxious kids too. So
Yes.
I've noticed that in my own lineage.
Let me say that what we've discovered when they look at our ancestors and our DNA, that they say our ancestors were an anxious crew. That's why they survived. They were really hypervigilant and careful and cautious. So we are naturally the anxious human group that is alive today. And it's very typical and common. So we have anxiety that stem from thoughts and from body as well, from our DNA.
Right.
Here I am in this doctoral program, and I took a course in shame psychology. And we had a shame specialist that moved up to our program from LA. Nancy Thurston was her name. She was doing all this big research. And she said in the class that shame is at the core of all of our emotional and behavioral struggles. And when I heard her say that, I thought, holy cow, like I need to learn how to not do this to my children, because I had 2 little kids at home. Of course, all my thoughts, all my focus was on rearing and parenting and building attachment, a secure attachment with my kids. And so I really wanted to understand, how do I not pass this on, when I learned what healthy shame was and toxic shame. So I started to study shame-free parenting. And really what kind of brought this up too was that I was struggling with my son. My son kept getting kicked out of preschools. Like we blew out of 5 preschools. How does a preschooler get expelled from preschools?
Hello, talk about some shame-producing incidents there.
Yeah. And they treated me like my son was just this terror. And it's because of you that this is happening. And that gets into the translation that what are you doing that this is happening to your son? This is how we get micro-shamed. There's micro-shames that we experience every day in little interactions with people, but where they confront you with this idea that whatever you're doing or something is a reflection of you. And so our children, a lot of people give us this message: if you have good children, you're a good parent. If you have bad children, you're a bad parent. And then here I am trying to be the role model of really good parenting, as I'm pursuing a parenting specialist, and my son cannot sustain in preschool. And I couldn't figure out why, because it wasn't making sense. He didn't present like a typical ADHD kid. He didn't present. So I was teaching this parenting class, and this one lady came up to me and she said, I struggled for years until someone told me about sensory integration dysfunction. And I discovered that's what my child had. And she started explaining it to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she is describing my son. So I did some research. I got the book, The Out of Sync Child, and I learned that this is a maturity issue of the nervous system. And kids who have this, they're sensitive to sensory input. So things are either too loud or they're sensitive to touch. Either they touch too hard or they don't like touch. They have issues with textures of food, of crowds. So I found out that this is what my son had. So here I had 2 children that were very close in age, just 18 months apart. I would
already
be with
a lot of work.
Yes. And I would be with my daughter and people go, oh, you're just such an amazing parent. Your daughter is so incredible. I just know you guys are amazing. And then I'd be with my son and people go, is everything okay? Is there something at home? Are you having a divorce? Is it thinking there's abuse at home or something? And I'm sitting there going, how can one parent have such opposite feedback from the public? And then I realized that my children received the same parenting, the same household. I didn't have trauma, didn't have all that stuff going on, but people perceived based on my son that we were dysfunctional, and they perceived based on my daughter that we were more than functional. And that's when I realized that our children are not an extension of us. They do not reflect our parenting. And yet I see this message all the time on social media. And in fact, I confronted one post one time they were saying that if your child's dysregulated, it's because you're dysregulated. You need to get regulated so your child will get regulated. And I said, this is true in many cases. However, it's messages like this that is shames parents who are regulated and their child is dysregulated, and they're doing those formulas, and yet their child is not getting regulated. That psychologist lost it on me, back messaged me, shame dumped essentially, and never had anything to do with me after that. And I was like, I wasn't attacking you. I'm just saying that because I knew some parents were reading it.
There's more to the story, right? That's the problem with social media too. But there is more to the story, and it is good to put that in there because I live this same exact story. There are times I've been to parent-teacher conferences, and I hear teachers that say, "I wish I had 20 Avas in my class, just like your daughter." And then I go to my sons and they need an hour and a half because there's so many things wrong. And I realized, Dr. Sean, this has nothing to do with me, that they are individual people having their own experience in school. That everyone is having an individual experience. So what you're saying is happening in households across the country. Yes. And it's so good to mention this. Okay. So this is resonating with you. Your son has this sensory processing disorder situation. And then where do you go from?
So if somebody is listening now and they go, I want to know if my child has this, it's typically evaluated by occupational therapists. Psychologists and mental health professionals are not trained in sensory integration dysfunction, which is so frustrating because 7 out of the 9 symptoms for ADHD are sensory integration symptoms. So a lot of kids who have sensory integration are diagnosed with ADHD, and the mental health professionals don't even have it on their radar that it could be this sensory issue. And the treatment for that is not medication, but occupational therapy. And they do all sorts of things to help that nervous system to develop. And you can also get on a 504 plan at your school. You can get accommodations, just lots you can do. So when I discovered this, I started to educate about it. And I was approached to write a book on shame-free parenting, which for your listeners, if they go to my Instagram page, there's a link to get a free chapter of that book that talks about the definition of shame and stuff. It's free. And I decided to make that accessible. And so I wrote this and I started talking on it. And then, it just took on a life of its own. And people are wanting me to talk about shame and teach them because they don't know until they hear me talk that shame is so much more than what they think it is. And so once they understand what it is, then they're really hungry to grow and learn from that.
Yes. So, because I started having the awareness of my own shame, and having the awareness for me was step one, but then there's like a whole bunch of other steps to have to shift your parenting to help your child. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that. If we have the awareness of shame, and if there's anything else you wanted to more talk about that, where do we go from here?
Yeah. So shame by nature hides itself from our own conscious awareness of it. We're very aversive to it because shame is social trauma. It is. So let's look at the definitions real quick.
Yes, please.
Guilt is what I feel when I violate my standards. So let's say I don't believe in lying and I lied and I have that internal conviction that goes, I shouldn't have done that. Don't do that, Sean. Just don't lie. You have that inner talk. So it's private. But shame, healthy shame, is what I feel when I violate your standards. So it is specifically a social emotion. I can feel fine. I can go to the grocery store and as a kid and take some gum. I have no conviction about that. I wanted that gum. I took it, put it in my pocket. And then my mom discovers my gum in my pocket. She scolds me. No, it is not okay to steal. So shame isn't just don't do it. It's a very firm stop. Do not do that. That is a hard line that we are drawing. You don't hit, you don't steal, you don't lie. Like it's firm. Don't show your privates. It's firm. And the message is, if you do this behavior that you're doing will endanger you and others, and it will take away your freedoms and everything. So do not do that. And so that's really helpful because it teaches a norm of values. And eventually, if we make agreements with that, we adopt those values and they become our own moral compass. That now we agree lying is bad. Now we agree
Makes
don't
sense.
steal.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
Live in
and
that.
That's where a lot of people will get, what if you have it inside? And so that's the difference between an outside standard now getting integrated into an internal standard. So toxic shame now is the message that when you did something bad, you didn't just do something bad, you are bad boy, girl.
Got it.
And now we have gone from personal conviction to an external correction to now an identity condemnation. And
in a split second, we're doing that.
Yes. So that's the message, bad boy, bad girl. When we don't separate the behavior or struggle or circumstance from the person, their identity of who they are. We do not want to connect those things to who they are. If they were a victim of a crime, that is not who they are. If they were molested, if they were violated, that is not who they are. It is something that happened to them. If they steal, lie, cheat, if they hurt somebody, that is problematic behavior, and that's how we want to look at it. But in old parenting, for lack of understanding and better words, people would give these messages by making it personal. And when they said things like shame on you, they're wanting that person to have internal conviction that they haven't adopted yet. And when they say bad boy, bad girl, they were trying to say this is bad, but they just merged it all. And sometimes when you're emotionally abused, they continue to give you that message. So now the parent's calling you a liar all the time. Why would I ever believe you? Because you're a liar. And so then you go, oh, I must be a liar. I'm bad. I'm unworthy. So toxic shame is the message that when I made a mistake, I didn't just make a mistake, but I am a mistake. I'm flawed. I'm not good enough. I'm defective. And because shame hides itself, we'll call it other things. Like we'll call it, I'm a people pleaser. I'm a perfectionist. I'm a type A personality. I am OCD. I have social anxiety. I have anxiety. I have depression. Name it, other things. The external social correction that we encountered was so intense, because shame is an intense emotion. It's one of our primary core emotions so just to prove that, guilt is measured in children that are 6 years of age and older with the development of complex thinking, 6 years of age. So now they're aware of their feelings, they can label them, and they can think through them. Shame is measured at 15 months of age.
No.
15 months of age. It is a hardwired primary emotion. It is without complex thinking. It is without our ability to assess, and it's there for our survival. And so that it's saying back in the day, if I did something bad, my cave people would kick me out of the cave, and then I get gobbled up by a dinosaur. So it's saying this is for your survival. And it's really intense.
Yes.
And when you get that intense experience, it just says, do not show this to people or you will get exiled. You will be rejected, unloved, and then not survive.
Oh my gosh. So much to even unpack there. So what you're saying resonates with me so much in what I see in my son, but specifically in terms of his learning differences. I know he has ADD, ADHD, some emotional dysregulation, but for so long, up until this year, Dr. Sean, he doesn't feel safe in school. And I know as his mom that it is from years and years of shaming by teachers and peers and parents of friends. And for you to also to point out that it gets hardwired shame at 15 months old makes me scared because
I'm talking about the shame. The shame response is hardwired. So they don't have a shame-bound identity yet.
Okay.
Okay. Because that has
response.
to have, that's a biological, physiological. We have the potential to experience a shame response with external correction. And and in that context, the emotion in my body informs and it signals an action. So I can take proper action. So if I'm doing something and someone goes, no, and then I stop, right? So it signals stop and my behavior stops.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes. If this continues, then when we're 6 and we're starting to develop our complex thinking, then we start to go into bad girl, bad boy thought process.
Yes.
And then someone forms their identity around that. And the thing with one of the symptoms that they're starting to talk about with ADHD is a symptom called sensitivity rejection dysphoria. Sensitivity rejection dysphoria, which means that they're highly sensitive to any sort of criticism and rejection, and they feel it more, like it's happening more, and it's happening very intensely for them. And people look at that and they think, oh, it's not that bad. That's the dysphoria. It's like a little bit, it's exaggerated and it's intense.
Yep.
That's a fancy name for shame trauma. That's a fancy name for shame trauma because I'm like, see, we can't even call it shame, that to even put it there, we have to come up with sensitivity rejection dysphoria. It's called shame. Yes. And so what that is, when you're a kid and you want to be rewarded, you want to be invited to that party, you want to be included, and you are constantly getting the message that there's something going on with me where I'm not getting that golden ticket. And I'm not meeting those expectations, and I can't meet the performance demands. And I am constantly being confronted with this. And so then, because it comes with negative feedback, you become very hyper vigilant. This is the trauma. Now very hyper vigilant to any disapproval or rejection. And when you're in a trauma response, your brain will it will filter information to only notice the things that are wrong and bad. And this is a neurological dynamic. You can't think your way out of that. So you have to have hacks, nervous system hacks, to help your brain not filter. So when people say, give yourself affirmations, no, that's not
happen. Mm-hmm.
There's more to the picture than just negative, and focus on these things. And then that shames people even more because they can't turn the mind from it.
And then
help
it. Exactly. Right.
They're neurologically compelled to focus on that because they are in a fight and flight state. So if somebody is there, one therapy that is really helpful is called safe sound therapy. And it's developed by Stephen Porges, who created the polyvagal theory. So for our listeners, if you want to learn more about that, I'm going to be teaching that in my courses so they can come and connect with me.
Absolutely.
But they can also go to just Google vagal chart. It's V as in Victor, AGAL chart in Google, and go to images, and you'll see these charts that will show you. I compare it to a traffic light. Like green light is your rest and restore place. That's the parasympathetic response. You feel peaceful, you feel open, creative. And when we're there, we learn the best. Yeah. But the yellow light is fight and flight. And the red light is freeze. Red light is where shame occurs because you feel stuck. You can't do anything. Kids who have ADHD are constantly in the yellow and red zones. And the problem with that is when we're in a fight and flight, we have limited our capacity to learn.
Right.
And those that talk about growth mindset, I love a podcast called The Neuroscience of Mindset by my friend Stephanie Fay. In her first season, she talks about this, like the growth mindset and how it affects classrooms. And if you are not feeling safe, you are not going to learn to the best of your ability. And what happens is a lot of schools will promote this idea of get the A. We celebrate the result of achieving something, but the growth mindset folks want to create an atmosphere that supports attempts and learning from the attempts. And this would be very helpful for someone with ADHD to not be embarrassed and think they look dumb because all the kids are calling them dumb and stupid and things. Right. And when they're called, their name is called and their mind goes blank because they just hit a freeze response. Because now socially, everyone's looking at them. It's really complicated.
Wow.
So a lot of kids who have this are like, I had ADHD growing up, and I hated it when they'd say, so Sean, you're in classroom, 30 kids, Sean, and all of a sudden you look, my brain, I went right to red light, froze and could not think.
You can't process when you're in fight or flight. You're
freeze.
Yeah.
Well, in freeze, your cognitive functioning shuts down. Totally. All your energy goes to surviving the fact that you're going to die, because it's what gets activated when we're going to die, like a mouse playing dead with a cat. So in that moment, my brain said, I'm dying. And so I had to think, but thinking brain was not accessible. And I'm like, and I couldn't speak anything. And then all kids like, she's so dumb. And so then you form a belief that I'm not smart. I can't do school. But we really want to nip that in the bud, because if a child starts to have school anxiety and doesn't find a way to work on that and help themselves through that, it translates into the workforce as adults. They become very aversive to applying for jobs. They don't want to work with people. So
no collaboration.
It's very hard.
Everything becomes challenging. We're taking a quick break to bring you a message from our presenting sponsor. You probably know already, I have a family with learning differences, and that's why I'm always open to educational options. If you're looking for a life-changing opportunity for your kid and your family, you should explore Curry Ingram Academy. Curry Ingram is a co-ed K-12 day school and boarding school where students are given the tools to thrive and succeed. There's also a residential option. So residential life at Curry Ingram is open to students in grades 9 through 12 and continues the mission of the day school by providing extended academic support while building independence and promoting responsibility. You can learn more at curryingram.org, and there's also a link in today's show notes. Now back to our conversation. Where do I go from here?
So when we had our kids, we had dreams for them. We want them all to be just shiny stars, having the best of the best, and where we're proud. And we're proud. Pride is a public emotion too. Your kid's doing something publicly that people go, wow. And you're like, oh, it just feels so good. So we all want to have the best situation. And yet we're given these human beings that have diversity and have unique neurodiversity. And there's so many factors that affect us as people. Our cultures, our communities, the news, the events, the social media, the peers, the teachers. It's so complex. Nutrition, hydration, sleep, all these things affect how a brain creates and develops. So as parents, we have to do our work around the grief and loss that we may experience with the dream that we have for them.
Oh, can you please say that again?
We have to do the work to process the grief and loss that we experience when our child does not have a normative experience that we dreamt for them.
That is the work.
That's that. Yeah. It's hard. And we have to radically accept it is what it is, and it's okay. It's different. And it's okay. Everyone's different. And you don't know when it's going to show up. And we can see parents who have these amazing situations and kids, and you're like, oh, you just wish so much that was your journey and that your kid could be doing that. But then you see later in life, they might have a setback. Then later in life, your child might have a forward motion. Yeah. So life happens. Life happens. Nobody gets free of hardship. No one's free of that. Every single person struggles in one of three areas at any given time: relationships, finances, and health, and a combination of it all. No one is free of that.
Yeah.
And shame compels us to compare our insides to other people's outsides. And this is deceptive. We don't know what's happening behind closed doors, and we don't know what's going to happen in the journey. Nor do we ever want to wish a hardship on someone, ever. So we have to radically accept our journey and what we have and know it's okay. And then we also have to make peace that your child is not a direct reflection of you. Yes, attachment is significant. I always promote and talk about secure attachment because attachment wounds are shame expressions of shame. So we do want attachment style does affect a child in their journey. So that is an area that we do affect our children. We do affect our children when we learn how to co-regulate with them, which means when they're like, think of the crying baby and the calm mother. That I saw this really powerful video, and I wish I saved it and kept it somewhere because I'd love to post it. And it was of this huge earthquake in Japan. And this mom was in a restaurant holding her little boy, and the boy might have been 4, and everything is falling apart on them. And someone's recording this mom, and the mom is so calm. And she's holding this child. The child's like, mommy, mommy. She goes, yes, honey. Yes, honey. It's just earthquake.
Pinnacle of peace.
And they're like, but, and she's all right. And she just kept it together for that kid, right? That is co-regulation. By her being calm, it helped the child to feel safe because the task of the parent is to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kinder. And to maintain that position, which is hard because we lose our stuff.
It's a practice.
Yes. I remember one time my son made me so mad, and I took every single item of his room and I removed it and threw it in the hallway. And I was in the kitchen. I could look down the hallway and I saw his bedroom in the hallway. And I just thought, good Lord, Sean, what did you just do? So I put everything back in his room. But we do have those moments. We're only human. So we are going to have moments where we're not always in control. And it is okay and good also to role model effective management of anger and sadness, that it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's about how we express it. That's the emotion coaching that we do with our kids.
Love that.
A great book on emotion coaching is on raising I think it's raising a responsible child, or it's raising intellectual intelligence, but it's by Gottman. Okay. And they normally do couples work, but they talk a lot about how to coach your children's emotions. So we are our kids' coaches.
Yes.
And we start with showing how we regulate it. So if we have a trauma response, which means that my nervous system struggles to down-regulate itself. So when you look at the traffic light, you go, your traffic light goes green, yellow, red, but it gets glitched in yellow and red. And it takes a long time to get back to green, or a green light pops out and it's not there anymore. So when we struggle down regulating our nervous system, this is not a you problem. This is a nervous system problem. And we need to learn about polyvagal theory and learn how to increase our vagal tone. So if you go to YouTube, there's tons of videos on vagal tone, how to improve it. Vagal tone. And these are hacks that we do to bring our nervous system back down, how to turn on the green light intentionally. And so we learn things like humming, gargling, tapping your chest, putting a bag of peas on your chest. You can put rubbing alcohol and cotton balls, put them in your ear. I've put that all over social media.
This then reduces the nervous system.
It brings it down. You are so mad at your kid, you're tired, and we're more emotionally vulnerable when we are hungry, lonely, angry, tired, stressed. We're more vulnerable. So it's like the immune system, a psychological immune system. You get really compromised. So you're more susceptible to the virus of anger and the virus of depression and things like that. Right?
This is where the self-care then, mamas, we got to be doing that work too.
So we are not as emotionally vulnerable and we're more emotionally resilient. So we really need to understand how our nervous system works and use the tools to down-regulate our own nervous system. And then reach out to your village. Find the resources and the help. And it's okay to say, I'm struggling. I wanted to just really go off on my kid. And there's a lot of things we don't talk about as parents. I remember having thoughts where I thought, I hate my child. In my head, I go, I hate him. And I'd be like, oh my word, how did that come into my head? And I felt like a horrible parent because I love my child. So how could I say this and think this? But It
We've all
happens.
been there.
All been there. So we need to take the shame out of these moments of saying, this is hard and struggling, and find the safe people that get it, because there are people that will look at you and stigmatize you. So that does exist. If you go to shame-bound people, helpers, therapists, doctors, friends that are using their children as a shame mask. See, I am good enough because my children are wonderful. Sorry for those folks, but that is not your measure.
Well, and that also goes back to what you actually spoke about. I've heard it at least 2 times on this podcast interview, is about children are not an extension of us.
No.
So we have to really live that, believe that, breathe it, know it. Also, not just for us, but for our child. Because when you treat them like that they're an extension, that's like nonstop shaming them. That is so detrimental to their well-being.
Yeah. They're their own separate individuals with their own separate thoughts and feelings. And they might grow up and not adopt your religion, your values, your style, your way of living. And that doesn't mean you didn't teach them. So many parents say, it's like, I never even taught them. They act like I didn't teach them this, and I did. And they won't. It doesn't mean they're going to do that. And for those that will judge a person, we can't change. Judges judge. It is the way they think and approach life, and they think and approach themselves. So we need to put down the effort to manage people's perception of us. So one of the symptoms of shame is that we do appearance management. And so to be shame-free, we stop appearance management. And that means we have to radically accept that people might not agree. They might judge us. They might think we're terrible parents. And we just have to make it our philosophy that what you think of me is none of my business.
Yep.
And it affects me. It hurts me. I wish it wasn't that way, but I'm not going to pay attention to that.
Absolutely.
And shame will motivate us to try to control things we can't control, and to overfunction for other people's dysfunction. And so we have to stop that. And I love the curriculum, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. They have free online groups all over the world. And they talk about that, how to not overfunction for other people's dysfunction, how to not try to control things that we can't control, try to change things we can't change. That's when our pain turns into suffering. And pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. We suffer when we try to do those things.
And I feel like we try to do those things because you are so desperately trying to hold up that facade, because you're stuck in my child as an extension. And so you're just working double time to hold up the facade of extension. But it leads nowhere good.
Yeah. And that's our trauma response with our child too, because we think, oh my goodness, if you don't learn this, if you don't adopt this, life is going to be hard for you. So it creates anxiety in us, and anxiety compels us to try to control something we can't control.
Right.
And we don't like feeling powerless. So it's the little trick that our mind does to help us survive that reality, is we assume responsibility for things that aren't ours. And the reason we do that is because it gives us a sense of power and control in a situation where we don't have power and we don't have control. So when we feel helpless, we'll twist it and say it's my fault so we can feel empowered. It's a little mental trick, but it's trying to help us survive that reality.
Yes.
My kids are now in their 20s, and if I could go back in time to the younger version of me, I would just hug her and hold her and say, honey, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. We're not going to do it perfect. We're not going to have all the answers, but just love them, just be with them, and just have peace. And that is something that we really need to work on. That's our own personal work.
Yeah.
And it really helps. I would say the final thing too is really, or there's 2 more things, is educate yourself about developmental stages so you can understand what to expect from your child. And if they have any neurodiversity, learn about that. These neurodiversity issues are affecting what they can and cannot do. one of the ways we get shamed is by given unrealistic expectations that are not developmentally appropriate or are not matching their neurodiversity. And many parents feel horrible when they learn their child has ADHD because they go, oh my gosh, I just would ground him. I get so mad at him. I told him he's being defiant and lazy. And I had no idea they couldn't do that. Dyslexic, had no idea they couldn't read. You got to give yourself a grace ticket on that and just be like, I did the best I could with what I knew. And we're constantly learning more and growing. So we want to learn about the body, our nervous system, our brain, our children's, how their makeup is, how our makeup is. And then as we equip ourselves with vagal tone and parenting strategy, if your listener has children between the ages of 3 to 8, my favorite parenting book is called The Incredible Years by Webster Stratton. You can get it on Amazon. It's phenomenal. So good for that age group. And for teens, I love the book Staying Connected to Your Teen.
Okay.
And it's like Riaz, RIAS or something like that. It's a Hispanic name. That is so amazing and helpful. I think it should be the Bible for every teen parent on parenting teens. And so you're learning these things. But the final thing is that having the information is not enough. We have to weave it into our life and practice every day.
Yes.
And it's not an arrival. When you master it, you didn't arrive. This is a life process till the day we die. We get up and we do our best and we try again tomorrow. And we learn more. We get up, we do our best, we try again tomorrow. And life is about the process, not the end result. So we need to let go of those result expectations. We think that chronologically, like when I graduate from high school, I go to college, then I get a job, I get married, I have children, and then I'll retire. You have this little formula that is these pillars we're chasing down.
Right.
But then people get there and they go, this is it? Seriously? None of it turned out how, if it was a direct result of your effort, it would look very different. But that's all the pieces we can't control. So you have to just let go of the American mindset. These
expectations that aren't real, or we're setting ourselves up for shame.
I wasn't good enough. Instead, we want to move more like water, like we're surfing waves, and just be in process. I have a friend who is Hmong, MONG, which is a Asian group that doesn't have specific country. They're travelers. And there's a lot of Hmong in my area in Eastern Washington and Idaho, Montana. And he said, I asked him how old he was one time. And he goes, I don't know. And I'm like, how do you not know how old? And he goes, the Hmong don't keep track of that. We're more about where you're at in your growth and maturity.
The present moment.
Yes.
This time.
And
they're experiencing the moment.
Yes. And your journey, where are you at in your journey? Rather than I'm this age, I'm this age, I'm this age. So I just decided in that moment, I'm now Hmong in my mindset.
I'm joining that club. Sounds good to me.
And so you just have to understand it flows. A lot of people get very discouraged with therapy too because of this. They think I'll go to therapy and this problem will be done. It's going to be over.
Yeah.
And what I say is if you've thought it, if you've experienced it, and it's been in your life on your timeline at any point, it will come into the gates of your mind. The difference is that instead of resisting it or clinging to it, ruminating it, fighting it, you're seeing it and you're letting it flow by. And it comes and you let it flow by.
Yes.
But you're controlling where you put your attention. And that when we become more skilled at that, we can weather the storms of life. It's about equipping you and helping you master your flow of the storm, rather than stopping the storm. And if the storm isn't stopped, then it's your fault. It's like looking to the weather and saying, it's raining again. It's my fault. I didn't do the rain dance good enough.
That's about how ridiculous it is. That's what you're pointing out. You're saying that's about how ridiculous it is. I'm so glad you brought that example up because it's ridiculous.
It is. And instead, we're giving them an umbrella. We're giving them a raincoat. We're giving them wood for a fire. We're showing them how to make a fire, how to use an umbrella. That's what we're doing in therapy. And then helping them not be alarmed that this thing is here again. And so we're reframing their thoughts and things like that. If I was to say in a nutshell, what do? Process the grief and loss. You learn about your nervous system, create the hacks, learn about your child's developmental stages, how their brain works, the neurodiversity, how your body works. And you start to practice it every day. Keep bringing in those resources, learn from parenting specialists, read the books, and free yourself from any idea you have to do it perfect.
You have to get out there and try these things and have a couple of fumbles. And that's how you get better.
Yeah.
And that's how you also build the connection with your child.
Yes. And it's so important that we learn how to be present and not chasing down activities. A lot of times when we're really busy, that is distractions to try to manage our anxiety. Sometimes we get very anxious being alone with our kids, especially if we didn't have a secure attachment with our own parents. Our bodies don't know that's okay. Mm-hmm. So we have to recondition those responses. And we just go and process and flow and move. And I know a lot of people will say, you are good enough. You are good enough. And people listen to that and they go, but no, I'm not. I'm suffering. I'm struggling. Stop telling me this is good enough. I want to know how I can make this better. And this is where I promote a dialectic philosophy, which is opposites can occur together. You can be loving and unloving at the same time. You can be strong and weak at the same time. You could be doing one thing with parenting amazing and another thing in parenting that needs improvement.
Yeah.
So the dialectic here is that you are doing the best you can with what you have in your body, in your history, your tools, your circumstance, and we need to do better. And we're growing. And I'm trying to find a way to say you need to do better because I don't want to say it in that language where it sounds shaming, but we are acknowledging that there's room to grow and there's room for improvement. And so we are going to continue. And that's a growth mindset, not just saying there's no failure, saying, okay, what can we learn from this failure to grow, to improve, to make it work?
It's all about, for me, it's all about tweaking, modifying. What worked, what didn't. Oh, more of that. Liza, do more of that. Add more of that. It's just tweaking, modifying, but you have to have the experiences, right? You got to get out there and have those experiences. Oh my gosh. Dr. Shawn, bringing in so much amazing information. I feel like we just got such an amazing download from you. I know people are really going to want to learn more about your offerings. I'm going to click everything into my show notes, but tell people where is the best place to find you and your work.
Yeah, I'm trying to redirect everyone over to YouTube right now. I have a lot of videos up where I'm teaching on that platform. I'm most active, I would say, on Instagram, so people can go there. But I also really encourage people to sign up in my Inspired Living School so that when I launch these courses and you take a deeper dive in everything that I just talked about today, they'll get notice and say, okay, we're going to talk about developmental stages in shame. We're going to talk about emotion coaching and shame and just really walk people through that. So I encourage people to sign up on my email list at my website, drshawnhorn.com, or you can use the links in my Instagram. And please send me questions. Send me, because I can make videos on those things and put it on YouTube. Somebody will say, okay, how do I deal with the shame of ADHD? And then I can do a video on that on YouTube. And then when we're going to do how to improve it, then I might have a course on that, kind of thing. Yeah. So do submit questions to me because that gives me content to address and talk about. And I'm very passionate. It's my mission to make information accessible to the general public, because a lot of people do not have access to or privilege to work with a provider alone. It's not therapy. It's not a replacement for therapy, but it is education. Yeah. Just like you attended a class or read an article. So my social media presence is education. And so they can find me on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I'm on YouTube. And those really are the three.
Quite the following too. Yeah, oh my gosh. I mean, huge followings. And it's because the information and the content you put out there is relatable, so important, educating parents. I love all the work that you do. I'm so grateful to know you, to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. And I do want to mention too that I have Inspired Living podcast. So they can also listen to that and submit questions for the podcast there as well.
Yep. And again, I am going to put links in the show notes. So we have people coming at you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sean. This has been such an amazing interview. I learned so much, and I know that the listeners did too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you felt inspired, please submit a review. More reviews help others find very happy stories. And don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone else you know who could use a very happy story right about now. Until next time, have a happy day.